Good evening. It's the 13th of March, 2023, at least according to the calendar. Given the weather we've had the last few days, it's hard to know if it's actually January or March or April or May. So I guess we'll have to believe the calendar right now, and we'll call it the middle of the month, the 13th. That means that we're moving very quickly, as this week we find ourselves in front of precinct elections next month, of course, county elections, and then we'll be soon moving to June when it's time for our statewide elections. But tonight, this show is all about you, your comments, your questions. It's what you want to talk about. It's coming up on this evening's The Hamilton Report. As I said a moment ago, this is your evening. It's time for you to tell us what you're thinking about, how you are seeing and feeling things around you. I know a lot of people have been experiencing some trauma, and I want to just open this up tonight so that everyone has a chance to share, to ask questions, make comments. This show is about you and what you would like to talk about. But first, I want to mention that everyone, well, most people know the trouble that Fox News is in. After the information was made widely public over the last week or so, the things that we've seen shouldn't surprise us, but still they do. Let's take a look at this very concise report from our friends at the Lincoln Project.
Referring to Trump, Carlson says, "I hate him passionately.
I hate him passionately.
We are very, very close to being able to ignore Trump most nights."
So there it is, Donald. The truth. All your friends at Fox hated you from the start, and hate you even more now. Rupert cut you off. He picked Tiny D DeSantis. Sean and Laura won't have you on. Even Tucker admitted it. He hates you. Passionately. You could handle that, but Fox wants to make you disappear, switch off the spotlight. Tucker couldn't wait to ignore you most nights. And Rupert, he promised to make you disappear. After all the money you made him, and as the walls are closing in on you, they've hung you out to dry. So what are you gonna do, Donald? For once, we'll help you. You may not like us.
The Losers Project.
But you know we always tell the truth. Fox deserves to be punished. You're strongest on Twitter. Go back there. Tell your people to drop Fox. It's the only way, Donald. The only way.
What's fascinating, I heard something early this morning that it really took me back a bit, because the interviewer asked the question of a political pundit saying, how badly will this hurt Fox now that all of their viewers know the truth of what's been said behind their backs and versus what's been presented on the camera? The response was startling. It said they don't know, because they get all their news from Fox News, and Fox News is not reporting on this. So it's very interesting to see the duplicitousness that Fox has shown. And again, not terribly surprising, because I knew that love fest couldn't last forever. But speaking of Twitter, as they just did, I want to show you a post that Ryan Walters, the superintendent of public instruction, underline the word public here, has been in a lot of trouble lately with people in Oklahoma. Last week, he posted on the state's website how they could get all of these resources for private schools and homeschools and vouchers and so forth. But this one takes the cake. Student safety over liberal agenda. I will always stand for students, Ryan Walters says. Now let's look at this photo for a moment. Why choose this photo? With a very clear picture of a young white woman, and in the background are two women of color. Now, he's talking about student safety over the liberal agenda. He's making his own conclusions here. And You don't have to call someone a racist for them to show you that they're a racist, but this is just him amplifying it up one more notch. It makes me sick, and it should make you sick too. It made a lot of Oklahomans very unhappy, and finally he removed the tweet sometime today because it was still there yesterday, and people were still throwing eggs at him with good reason. You all know that he is not my favorite person, and I think things are coming home to roost for Ryan Walters. I certainly hope so. When I mentioned that tonight's show was all about you, I did get a response earlier today with a question. What does it mean to be a Democrat? Well, first I want to say that when I talk about Republicans on this broadcast, I'm talking about elected officials. I'm talking about legislators. I'm not talking about people who simply register as Republicans, because I have good friends who are Republicans. They vote, they have a conscience, and many of them are surprisingly not far away from where I am in terms of ideology and what we want to see in our state and in our country. So I wanted to be clear that I'm not talking about all Republicans. I'm talking about those in positions of power in our state and what they're doing to us instead of for us. But the question was, what does it mean to be a Democrat? Well, I can tell you in Oklahoma really is, our party is the big tent party. We have ultra liberal Democrats. We have more conservative folks. We have young people. We have old people. We have people of many races, many religious affiliations, and none at all. So we have a very wide thought process within our party. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes that's challenging to be able to find common ground for us, but it's something that we do. And I believe that it's more of an embarrassment of riches than anything else to have so many opinions by so many people. And that's exciting to me. But the bottom line, the base notes of our party here in Oklahoma are that we believe that every Oklahoman should have access to quality health care. People also, every child, regardless of zip code, should have access to high quality public education. And the third prong is we believe in economic opportunities for all Oklahomans. That's why the legislation that we sponsor and push so hard for are things that help all people as opposed to very, very small minorities of people. It's interesting. Eric says here that Trump is too polarizing. Absolutely. And we could say the same thing about so many other people. But it should concern us that he is the first one to announce his candidacy. And it's going to be a very interesting few months for him and for the nation as we look on to see what is happening. I wonder from you folks who tune in regularly, what you're thinking in terms of religion in politics, in schools, in our state, because Walters has formed this task force to study organized prayer in schools. And his group is largely white Christian fundamentalist folks. So it won't be a big surprise what their findings are. But I've never, ever hidden the fact that I am a Christ follower. That's central to my life. It's central to the way I try to live my life in the best way possible in terms of helping other people. But I am chagrined to think that we're moving back to a time like when I was in high school, where before every game, there was a Christian prayer led usually by a cheerleader before a football game and a basketball game and a wrestling match and a track meet. And I thought even then it was odd because it just felt uncomfortable to me. What about the Jewish students and the Muslim students, the Hindus, the Buddhists, those who had absolutely no religious affiliation? And yet that's something that's very much on the mind of legislators and leaders in our state, putting God back in school. And my response to that is God was never taken from school. And if your God was, then your God is very small. If your God could be just kicked out of a public place. So that's not the issue. The issue is spoken public prayer by someone in a position of authority. It very much concerns me. And I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Do you think it's a good thing? Will that make schools safer? Will that make time in school better for our young people? And we already have a moment of silence where people have the opportunity to meditate, to think, to pray, to get a couple extra minutes sleep, whatever it is. That's their time, and there's no one urging them or pushing them to do any one thing with that moment of silence. To me, that seems like it should be enough. Why do we have to go a step further? And frankly, I believe that religious instruction belongs in the church and in the home. It does not belong in public schools, because we in Oklahoma represent a multitude of different religions and backgrounds. We welcome people from all over the country here, and it just doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel right to me that we're pushing to have Christian prayer in schools. Kerry says if he does it, Muslims and other religions will ask for their prayers to be respected too. You cannot just have one religion in school. And I agree with that. And so then what does that do to the Christian parents who will not at all want their students to participate in a Muslim prayer or a Jewish prayer or anything that doesn't begin with Father God and end with in Jesus' name? Again, I'm talking about my personal conviction versus someone else's personal conviction. And I don't think that the public school is the place to hash that out. We talk so much about wokeness. That word, I swear, has become such an evil sounding word. And yet it's something I'm very proud of, because you have to be awake to be able to recognize the needs of other people. You have to be awake to understand that we are not a top 10 state, that there is much, much wrong here that needs to be fixed, and we have the ability to fix it. But what we can't do is demonize people for their wokeness. I thought it was very interesting that Ted Cruz is hyping his new book about being anti-woke, which I guess means that he's asleep, but it's being featured as national bestseller, Ted Cruz. Well, it's interesting. His first book, his campaign spent $150,000 buying up those books to give away. His second book, his campaign spent nearly $225,000 to do the same thing. So, yeah, you can buy your way onto a bestseller, I guess, but that doesn't mean it's something that I intend to read. All right, let's talk some more. What's going on with you? What are you thinking? Eric asked a very good question. So how do we get closer to the top 10 best states? Well, the short answer is we've got to quit doing things that put us in the bottom 10. Last week, amidst all the sturm and drang going on here in our legislature, we found out that Oklahoma received a failing grade in how we deal with premature babies. Our state has a very high percentage of premature babies, and what we do with them depends largely on the ethnicity of the mother and the quality of the hospital where the mother happens to be giving birth. And so to throw us right there, how do we move out of the 51st place for women? This is the 51st worst place in America for women. Well, how do we address that? For one thing, we quit treating women as if they're less than, that they are second-class citizens. We need to really look at pay equity for the same pay, for the same jobs, for people who have the same level of education and or experience. We have to begin to recognize our weaknesses, Eric. I think it is the best way for us to start to become or to move up that ladder. I won't even say top 10. I'd be satisfied with the top 25 in most cases. It would get us out of just the absolute bottom of the barrel. But we have to quit we have to quit fooling ourselves. We have to quit lying to other people in our state by claiming to be a top 10 state. We are not. Now, how can we become so? Well, we had a really good chance with Volkswagen, who was looking at Oklahoma to come here to produce their batteries. It would have pumped billions of dollars into our economy, even though the state was secretly giving them an enormous tax break. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars to come here. In the end, they decided not to come to Oklahoma. They went to South Carolina and they went to Canada. It's not a real surprise at why that happens, because Oklahoma is becoming less and less hospitable to anyone other than just a select core group of people. And so, again, it's broadening our scope instead of narrowing it, broadening it to say, how can this legislation impact positively the most Oklahomans? How can we look at our education system and say, okay, what do we need to do? Well, I'll tell you one thing we've got to do is reckon with teachers as if they are the professionals that they are. I frankly find it just very disconcerting that someone can become a school teacher with a high school degree in Oklahoma now. This, and after so many of our educators earned masters and PhDs to be the best teachers that they can be. We keep talking about pay incentives for the best teachers. Who decides who's best? Well, the way it's looking now is that would be each individual school board. It cannot be objective. That would make it very subjective, and the teachers who were most liked by the most people would be the ones getting the raises. We have to look at entry-level pay for teachers. We have to look at teaching conditions, the size of classrooms, the taking away hours of preparation time. And still, we have teachers, as you all know, who are spending their own money to decorate their classrooms, to provide pencils and paper for their students. And these things are fundamental changes that we can make. They're not over the top at all. They're quite doable. And yet, for whatever reason, we're not doing them. When we look at counties that are not in close proximity to Oklahoma City or Norman or Tulsa, we can see that there is great disparity in our state. And the way that the legislature has changed our congressional districts, it's nothing except to gain votes. It has nothing to do with the people. For example, I think I've shared with you before, I was in CD3, right in the middle of Oklahoma City, which made perfect sense. And then when they redistricted, they cut my neighborhood and one just to the east of us out because we are a blue neighborhood, and they threw us in to CD. I'm sorry, I was in CD5. Now I'm in CD3. So CD3 goes all the way to the Panhandle. Needs of rural Oklahomans are different from the needs that I experience in my community. My bridges and roads are okay. Bridges are fine. Roads, not so much. But those are very different from the lived experiences of people in smaller towns in Oklahoma. That's why we're working so hard to stand up county parties, because we need people to understand that they're not the only ones there. And I want to go back to this comment from Eric, going back to education for a moment. Nothing short of the serious commitment by the state to address our education system will suffice. Truer words were never spoken. It takes a serious commitment, and we've got to stop with all of the culture wars in the Department of Education. We've got to stop with the nonsense, taking the word diverse out of science classes. Now, that's crazy talk, But that's exactly what he's done. He's eliminated the word diverse. So does that mean you can't talk about biodiversity? Exactly, that's what it means. The same way that you can't talk about slavery. So many problems. And so to your point, Eric, it really is a lack of commitment by our leaders to make substantial positive changes. And Robin, I feel your pain here. Robin says, I hope this can happen. I'm so worried about my kids getting a quality public education. And I'll tell you something, Jerry, I couldn't agree with you more. Ryan needs to resign. He won't. He won't. His ego would not allow him to do so. He says that his election was a mandate for school vouchers, but nobody wants them. These vouchers will impact 8% of our students in public education, 8%. But because we're doing that, we may now not have enough money to eliminate the grocery tax, the state grocery tax, which is something that, again, would positively impact the lives of every single Oklahoman. This is basic human care, things that we can do and aren't doing. The homeless situation in Oklahoma is worse than I've ever seen it. It's horrifying. I'm talking about veterans. I'm talking about people with families. I'm talking about older adults that I talk to on the street, and they can't find a shelter that will take them, or they can't find a shelter that will take them and their dog. They can't find employment because they don't have an address. These are all things that could be fixed, but instead we're too busy playing cowboy at the Capitol. And you think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding at all. That's exactly what they're doing. I did not coin this term, but I absolutely, I love the fact that RuPaul said it. We are dealing with culture queens at the Capitol. These are people who will stand up and fight to the death for something that has no impact on them and virtually no impact on most Oklahomans. And yet, this is what we're spending our time and money focusing on. People, we have got to do better, and we've got to demand more. We've got to demand more of our elected officials. I say this all the time. I tell people, put your legislators in your phone. It doesn't matter if they're independent, Democrat, Republican. That doesn't matter, because they still have to log every call, every email. So if they're doing something boneheaded on the floor of the House, or they're proposing legislation through the Senate that just does not make sense, we have to call our legislators and say, stop this, put a stop to it right now. Sadly, we have leaders who are prone not to listen. And people say, oh, well, we'll just vote them out. Well, let me tell you, it's going to be a hell of a long almost 4 years before we have the chance to do that again. So we have to make the changes that are necessary now, or in 4 years, people with educations, people who are different from what our legislature looks like, they'll be gone. They're leaving in droves. I hate that, but I understand. You know, Eric, this is so right. Homelessness should break everyone's heart. Mental health is a driving issue. It is, and yet that's something that we fail to put much emphasis on here. The new nationwide 988 number, it truly is a way for anyone experiencing a mental health crisis to reach out, or just if you're feeling down, you can still call that number. Unfortunately, that's something that the governor has co-opted and tried to make his own when he had nothing to do with it. That's money furnished through this administration as a part of the Build Back Better campaign. Why not give credit where it's due? It's not going to hurt you. Then take what you get and then make the most of it for Oklahomans. Instead of saying, I'm going to eliminate federal funding from Oklahoma schools. What kind of nonsense is that? Every state relies on federal dollars for education. And boy, yes, Betsy DeVos is the one who single-handedly set all this in motion, Jerry. Thank you for that. And Wilma, you guys have got some great comments this evening. Wilma says they could let a SNAP card be exempt from grocery tax as a means of testing it. Yes, whatever it takes. Let's just move this on down the line. It's time to quit talking, and it's time to start working. And the only way any of this is going to happen is if we work together. I hear our Democrats, and they talk about working with their colleagues across the aisle at the state capitol. So that means that we do have Republicans who are interested in working with Democrats. We have some that just absolutely refuse. And there's no rhyme, no reason other than you're afraid someone else may steal your thunder. Small rural towns have homelessness and zero shelters. Oh, this is so true. I met a man and his dog. And I asked him, I said, how long have you been out here? And he said, 13 years this time. He said, I was in a small community and I tried to find some place to live there and it just didn't work. And so now we're back in Oklahoma City talking about he and his dog, just trying to get by. This man is a veteran, and I gave him some information about the VA and the services that they offer, and I could only hope that he made the call. But these are the things that if we don't start paying attention to people, putting people first, people above politics, people above policy, people above procedures, then we're going to wind up in a place where none of us really wants to live. No matter what we think today, it could change dramatically and dramatically for the worse. Let's see. Michelle says, I 100% agree with Scott. I'm a huge believer in separation of church and state. That being said, we also have our First Amendment rights, which means kids should have the right to pray, meditate, or have their moment of silence for whatever their faith or beliefs. Enforcing Christian prayer or anything to a specific deity or religion goes against those rights. Children should not be subjected to religious indoctrination. We're not a Christian nation. We have a nation of multiple religions. Yes, and I'm glad that you said religious indoctrination. This word, indoctrination, has become one of the new evil words that we are hit with all the time. You're indoctrinating my students. Woke indoctrination. And yet, our superintendent of public instruction is sending all teachers through a rigorous patriotic training program that's sponsored by whom? Hillsdale College. Ultra-conservative right-wing group that the Southern Poverty Law Center has named a hate group. That we're going to spend money with them to train our teachers how to be better patriots. No. We've got to stop with the name calling. We've got to stop with the way that we're just throwing things at the wall and hoping they'll stick. Sadly, those things are hitting our children. Sadly, those things are hitting our older folks. Why in the world can't we celebrate the fact that insulin is now kept at $35 a month for seniors? And our state senators and our state representatives in Washington are still crying, oh, no, it should be the free economy and the pharmaceuticals should be able to charge whatever they want to make a profit. Believe me, they are making a very nice profit. So, friends, let's talk about what it means not to be a Democrat or a Christian, or even as far as that goes, as an American. Let's talk about what it means to be a person and how that personhood has got to be a guide for us. For whatever reason, we have become, I know why we've become such a divided nation, but we've also become very myopic, focusing on those things that are only important to us, to our families, and no one else. It's time we open the lens. It's time for all of us to wake up. to the needs of others. Because when we do that, we start to change things fundamentally. First, we change ourselves, then we start to change the things around us. And this is the positive change. This is the positive change that will make Oklahoma a good place to live. We started this conversation. How do we become a top 10 state? I said the first thing is recognizing what we're doing wrong. And then the next thing is taking action ourselves to be more involved, to raise our voices for the people who can't, to call our legislators, to email them, to visit them in the Capitol and say, stop this nonsense. I care about my community. I care about Oklahoma, and I care about people that I will never meet just because they're people and they have rights and concerns and issues and fears just like I do. Wow, the time really got away from us this evening. I am so grateful for the comments tonight. I just wanted to try something a little different, and I'm glad we did because it lets me have a better sense of where your thinking is. And these are all things that we can focus on in the weeks to come because your issues, I need to be really strong here, your issues are not just yours. If you believe something is wrong, then someone else does too. Or if you believe something is going well, we need to talk about how we can make it be even better. Friends, we are actually past time for this episode. Next Monday evening, March 20th, Jana Lewis Harkins will be my guest. She is the president of the Oklahoma Federation of Democratic Women. There is a big legislative day coming up next week at the Capitol, followed right away by their state convention with some amazing speakers. It's always a pleasure to welcome Jana back onto the show. And like I said, she'll be with us next Monday evening at 6:30. And I certainly hope that you will be too. In the meantime, take good care of yourself. On behalf of all of us at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, I'm Scott J. Hamilton, thanking you for joining us. And I'll see you next week on the Hamilton Report. Good night.